Well, hello there, folks. Welcome to another video, and this time I'll be talking about the final installment of the Naked Gun trilogy, Naked Gun 33, and the third, The Final Insult. And yes, obviously this is the Blu-ray that I watched it on, of course. Picture quality and sound is pretty decent, and like I said before, no extras because Paramount or Parapricks. So what a shock there. And overall, still to this day, I enjoy it. It still is highly fun for being 25 years old since it came out in March of '94. The humor it's still there, has some great slapstick, some great visual gags, and funny one-liners here and there. You know, I meant to say this earlier in my other reviews. You know, this movie is definitely un-PC. It just goes for it. And sadly today, you won't get films like these just because they want to play the PC card pretty much, which is unfortunate. But I actually originally did record a review for this earlier, but I didn't like how it turned out. Plus, I was kind of interrupted by that phone call, and it kind of took me out of there. But I would find out that the phone call was actually a blessing in disguise because it was something job-related. I have an interview set up for next week, so I'll discuss more on that in a more personal vlog, which I plan to do, you know, soon after this, I think. So yeah, back on the subject. I definitely enjoy this film. It's still holds up very well, and I mean, it's still a very good sequel. I feel like, in all honesty, I think I like all the Naked Gun films pretty equally. You know, the first two are still pretty good. This one holds up well. Sadly, this one, I mean, it did make its money, but it was actually the lowest grossing one of the series. I guess maybe they felt like it was getting a little too tiresome, and maybe had a bit more competition that year. Because the second one actually was the highest grossing one of all the three, so. But anywho, let's get to the crew and the cast. David Zucker is involved in this. He actually produced along with Robert K. Weiss. Robert K. Weiss. I don't know why I said that, but anyways. Zucker, I believe, also wrote the screenplay as well, along with Pat Proft and a newcomer, Robert Locash. However, this time he did not direct it. This was directed by Peter Siegel, and this was actually his directorial debut, actually. And he was a pretty solid director. He would go on and direct a lot of other comedies that I have seen. I haven't seen all of them, but he has directed some that I'm familiar with. Like, after this, he did Tommy Boy next. I'm not familiar with My Fellow Americans. He would do the second Nutty Professor film, Nutty Professor 2, The Clumps. He would do Anger Management, which I actually enjoyed because of Adam Sandler and Jack Nicholson and the chemistry that they had. They played off each other very well in that film. 50 First Dates, I didn't mind. It was decent. I haven't really seen The Longest Yard, but I do know that Sandler was in it, and I know it has like a guest appearance by Michael Irvin, one of my favorite players during the Cowboys. As you happen to know, I'm a Cowboys fan. You also have Get Smart, which I know had Steve Carell, Anne Hathaway, and The Rock were in it. Grudge Match, which I heard wasn't very good, and it had Stallone and De Niro in it. And then he did Second Act, which was actually a Jay Lopez movie, which I didn't even really know about, but it apparently did well from what I researched. And then next year, apparently he's directing a film called My Spy, so I don't know who's in it. Well, oh yeah, okay. Dave Bautista's in this film, so. Yep, it's due to be released on January 10th, actually, 2020. And that's usually not a good sign, because that's usually considered dump month for movies. But getting back on the subject of this film, you pretty much have most of the cast members coming back from this, you know, reprising their respective roles. Leslie Nielsen comes back, Priscilla Presley comes back, George Kennedy comes back, O.J. Simpson also returns, and then apparently later on that year he was involved. He would become highly publicized in a very controversial murder case for which he was involved in. Whether he really did it or not, that's really, you know, it's just very highly controversial, so I won't go into that detail. I believe you also had the what's that guy's name? Ed Williams, who played, you know, Ted Olson, the criminal scientist that always was able to find clues and stuff like that, and interesting little inventions and stuff like that. Like, there was like one scene where apparently they invented a new car theft proof thing where it was called the jock strap or something, where basically it places some kind of jock strap right on his fucking crotch, which was hilarious. But yeah, it's filled with some very interesting, unique gags. But apparently the newcomers here, we have Fred Ward, who was actually a pretty familiar actor. I know he was in films like Remo Williams back in '85. He also was best known for being in the first two Trimmer films, and several other roles that I can't really think of. I know he had a small role in Road Trip, actually. And then you also have Kathleen Freeman as Muriel, Rocco Dillon's mother, which is for Fred Ward's character, as I meant to mention. And you also have the very late Anna Nicole Smith as Tanya Peters, who plays Rocco's girlfriend and tries to seduce Frank as well, too. Then you have Ellen Green, who appears as Louise. I already said that. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, there is one other person that does come back. Raye Birk as Pahpshmir. He does return as well, so it's good to know they kind of bring him back, and they also kind of tie up that loose end. And also, Weird Al Yankovic has a cameo in this as well. But you also have some other interesting cameos, because later on it will be set at the Academy Awards ceremony, where you have some interesting little cameos, like you have James Earl Jones, Olympia Dukakis, Raquel Welch, Mariel Hemingway's in there, Elliot Gould. Gosh, there were so many other ones. Apparently, Pia Sedora. I'm not really familiar with her. I'm guessing she is a musical artist. And some other actress, I guess, by the name of Mary Lou Retton. Never really seen any of her work, so I can't really comment. But I can't remember. I didn't know if I mentioned Vanna White, but she's in this as a cameo. Gosh, what else? I think I mentioned Raquel Welch. Gosh, who else? Oh yeah, Randall Tex Cobb also appears in the prison sequence whenever Frank is going undercover, what have you. Oh, and yes, R. Lee Ermey's in there as well too. So there you go. You have some interesting little cameos in there. But anyways, just to sum up the plot of the film. Oh, before I get to it, apparently you had Ira Newborn, who did the music as well, released through Paramount Pictures, and as a result, the film did make money. The budget was $30 million. Made like around $51 million, so it made its money, but definitely it was the lowest grossing film of all three of them. And sadly, this was, I believe, the last highest grossing film for Nielsen during that time, because the later films that he did afterwards, they were flops pretty much. So yeah, let's get to the plot, and I'll talk about that. So basically, Frank Drebin has basically retired from police squad, living a seemingly happy life with his wife Jane, who actually they got married. They actually showed a clip for that, and that was actually meant for police for the second film actually. But I guess they decided to end it the way they did for the second one. So you can kind of tell because Jane has her little hair being darker, like that dark red color. It has the electric car and all that other stuff. So yeah. But anyways, despite all that, Frank's not happy being being a house husband and all that. He's even had to take up cooking and whatnot. Like he's able to make these cupcakes and the brownies that he would bring that he would bring to the police squad station. And of course, 6 months after this, he's visited by Ed Hocken and Nordberg, which are George Kennedy and O.J. Simpson's characters, respectively, because they need his help for an investigation. They basically have caught wind that a infamous bomber known as Rocco Dillon, which is Fred Ward's character, who's, despite being currently incarcerated, has been hired by terrorists to conduct basically several major bombings, within the United States. And also in the very beginning, you also see that he's actually connected with Pahpshmir, so it's kind of cool that they brought him back to kind of tie up with that particular character, and eventually the loose ends itself would be taken care of towards the end. But anyways, so basically, Frank apparently remembers Rocco's girlfriend Tanya Peters from an investigation years ago. Like they flash back to the 70s, and it was kind of an interesting year. And you also see how Nordberg's hair looked back in the day, which I'll get to in the funnier gags and the pros and cons of the films. So basically, Frank goes in disguise at a clinic, fakes an injury, and wears glasses and tries to get to the bottom of where Tanya's address is at, and he has to go undercover by being a sperm donor, and he does this like more than once, and eventually he does get the address, but he has to write it on lipstick. But unfortunately, before he doesn't want to get caught, so he tries to keep up the appearance of being a sperm donor and all that stuff. But I'll get to the funny gags and lines in there and stuff like that. So basically, when he gets home, he's pretty much exhausted from all that, and his wife Jane tries to make love and try to seduce him to save their marriage, because apparently their marriage has grown stale. She wants children, and Frank is hesitant to do that. So Jane notices some scratches and lines across his back, and truly believes that he's back on police call, which is not the case. And he actually swears he's having an affair or something like that, but Jane doesn't believe him and actually moves out of the house. And pretty much with nothing to lose, Frank, decides he's going to go undercover. He volunteers for that, to go into prison to kind of befriend Dylan and learn the details of the bombing. And he's even put in Rocco's cell prison, and even adapts the name Nick the Slasher McGurk. And Rocco's not exactly warming towards him, but eventually he gains Rocco's trust after protecting their escape plan from a guard, which is actually in fact played by Arlie Ermey. He tries to get, he actually finds out what it is, but before he can announce it or take it to the person in charge, I forget. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But he decides Frank decides to pull off this distraction. That way he can earn Rocco's trust, and then apparently a food fight ensues, and eventually causes a riot, and then eventually somehow Rocco and Frank are able to escape through a tunnel by digging out a lot of dirt, and they have to find ways to displace the dirt like they would displace it during the lunch hour, where a person was actually eating dirt, and they would try to distribute the dirt in certain areas around the prison. And eventually they do escape, and they're actually met outside by Rocco's mother, Muriel, which is Kathleen Freeman's character. And eventually they get to Rocco's hideout, where Frank does try to get more info out of the bombing from Rocco and his mother, but they're not exactly trustful of him and don't give him any details. In the meantime, Jane and her friend Louise, they're on a road trip together, and they actually kind of parody the Thelma and Louise thing, because the friend's name is Louise, and Jane even gets on the style of Thelma's clothing. And then apparently, whenever she decides to exit the bar where they were at, because it was becoming too much, she encounters a trucker, which, by the way, is actually played by Mark Alamo, which I forgot to mention, but he's kind of well known in some sci-fi roles like Arena, and he actually appeared in Tango and Cash as one of Perret's henchmen. So basically, when the trucker tries to hit on her and stuff like that, Jane's able to tase him, knock him out, and right when he's calling her at a phone booth and she wipes herself with a handkerchief, she realizes that Frank was telling the truth, because she's able to see the lipstick writing and stuff like that. And then she actually decides to go in the semi truck and actually drive down there. And then when eventually Jane arrives, Frank actually answers the door and has to quickly cover for her, and has to convince the Dylans that she's just a random stranger, but they should keep her alive as a hostage for insurance, pretty much. Then eventually Rocco finally reveals his plan to Frank, because they wanted to test this bomb, which would actually appear in the envelope, and it would set off. And their plan is to take this bomb to the Academy Award ceremony with the bomb hidden in the envelope, and it would be in the winner of the Best Picture category, and triggered whenever the card's pulled out. So basically, they do eventually get to the awards ceremony, where both Rocco and Tanya go inside to plant the bomb and try to distract some people. And eventually, this gives Frank the opportunity to actually tie down Muriel in the car to make sure she doesn't get out. And both, with the help of Jane, they both go on a frantic search to go find the bomb. They even rob somebody's clothing, which is actually in fact Weird Al Yankovic's character and Vanna White as themselves, actually. And they go, and then Frank, decides to inflict his usual chaos while Jane's starting to search through these envelopes to see where the bomb's at. He thinks that at first it's going to be in this one envelope that's actually presented by Elliot Gould and Mariel Hemingway, but it turns out that's not the case. And then when Raquel Welch gets on the stage, he actually knocks out apparently stand-in that would be Phil Donahue, and so he knocks him out, supposedly. I don't know if Phil Donahue actually appeared in it, probably not, but he knocks him out, goes under the disguise of Phil Donahue, and whenever he tries to get on the stage, the stairs move, but he's able to get on there, but unfortunately he causes Raquel Welch to, whenever Frank's rolling down the stairs and all that, he rolls down, kicks her butt, and she goes headfirst into the microphone, and it's actually stuck in her mouth, and Frank has to perform the Heimlich on her. And basically, he tries to go back and forth with her on the teleprompter and on the envelope, and it turns out the bomb's not in there either. And then whenever they discover Frank is causing some chaos, like he has to escape. Forget how this works, but anyways, he has to go into the disguise on stage. Like, he has to perform a musical act, which he's not prepared for, and the usual shit happens. He doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He caused quite a mess up there. And when they're still trying to look for him, he actually runs into Tanya, demanding to know more about where the bomb's at, and she reveals where it's at, the best picture category. And she's like, she wants to come on straight to him, because earlier she tried to seduce him despite being with Rocco. And then she would reveal in a silhouette that she's actually a man, because her dick's or his dick, or whoever it is flipped the other way, and this disgusts Frank, and he throws up in a tuba. And he actually notices that James Earl Jones and Olympia Dukakis are actually going to present the award. And Frank intervenes, and actually it ends up being the bomb, and he even says it's the bomb, but apparently all the crowd starts cheering, and apparently this movie called Sawdust and Mildew is the winners, and apparently this Academy Award has a lot of parody names, like there's Geriatric Park, story about Mother Teresa, and Mary Lou Retton about her story, dealing with the loss of her cat, and then you have Morgan Fairchild, struggling with the loss of what was it? Oh yeah, bulimia. And then you also have Shannon McDoherty, who's her problem was I can't remember. Anywho, basically they end up Rocco and Frank, battle out, to prevent, the detonation of the bomb, and then he ends up going in a stalemate with Rocco, and then Frank, when they were struggling for the gun, he shoots one of the electric signs and falls on Muriel's head where it says applause, and then goes to standing ovation, and she ends up falling down into the crowd of the band and whatnot. And then basically this desperate Rocco decides he's going to detonate the bomb to follow his mother, and then they both have this moment where Frank exchanges the letter for the gun, and he tries to be smart about it by knocking the letter off, and then Rocco fools him by this, "Hey, look, George Hamilton," and grabs the gun from him, and they all do that same face palm, which is just hilarious. But eventually when Frank tries to, find a way to stop Rocco, Rocco drags Jane somewhere on the stage, offstage actually, on the catwalks above, and eventually, despite Frank getting caught up in this rubber cable, somehow Frank snares Rocco with the rubber. He knocks him out, and then when Rocco's falling down, at the same time, Nordberg is trying to get rid of the bomb safely. He actually stops Rocco from falling completely down with the rubber cable, and then somehow Rocco is actually able to grab the bomb right out of the envelope, and it slams in through the roof out of the arena. And then eventually Rocco crashes into actually Pahpshmir's private helicopter hovering overhead, and they both exchange words for like a few seconds before the bomb explodes. And then eventually, Frank and Jane reaffirm their love under the applause of the award audiences and viewers worldwide. And apparently 9 months later, Frank and Nordberg actually rush into the to the hospital ward to witness the birth of Frank's child, but somehow they both run into the wrong delivery room, and then Frank is actually filming with a video camera, and they see that the baby is African American. Frank presumes that Nordberg's responsible, where it's his child, and he starts chasing after him, but just after they leave, Ed comes out of the hospital room with Jane, who's actually holding the real baby, and that's how the film ends. So overall, I really do enjoy this sequel. It's definitely funny. It's got some great moments of humor, levity, gags, funny lines, and visual humor and stuff like that. This movie would not get made today because of the whole PC nature of comedy these days, of what they think is funny. And it's just sad that you won't get films like this. So I'll actually say one of the cons. I think I kind of wish, looking back, the ending would have been a little bit more to it because of the way it ended. And sad to say that, O.J. Simpson would have his problem later on, and whether he committed that crime or not, it's just really highly controversial. And I don't know. This film is actually pretty short. This is actually like an hour and 22 minutes. The other ones were a little over 80 minutes. That's definitely one of the great things about these films, is they're pretty short. They don't go over long, have too many subplots and all that stuff. So that's one of the things I like about this. But I can't really think of any cons to this film, honestly, because this has a lot of pros, and I'll actually get to that. You basically have... I'm glad they brought back, of course, the usual police intro, because it wasn't as... I think in the second one, it wasn't quite as long. This one, at least, was a little bit longer, and it's kind of cool to see it go through all that stuff. In the very beginning, I like how it opened where Frank is... he's actually having a dream where basically he's at this sequence where... I think he's at a train station, and he's basically trying to, help a mother out, trying to carry up her child up to the stairs, and Hawkins trying to do the same thing, and apparently Nordberg's at a hot dog stand, and they're trying to... Apparently they're in a battle with, I think... what's that guy's name? I don't know who the actor is. I've seen him before. I think it's Al Capone and the mob, and whenever they start to when they know that one's a cop and when one's a bad guy, pretty much they start pulling out their weapons, and then pretty soon almost everyone starts coming in. Like, you see the Pope coming in, you see people protecting the president, and you see postal workers going amok or ensuing chaos with weapons, and Frank actually has like a minigun, but apparently it's too much and he runs out of ammo. He can't stop him, but apparently it was a dream. He wakes up with Jane, and then when he thinks that everything's going to be alright, he actually puts the power cord into some water unintentionally, and the bed starts messing up, closed on them, and it throws them both out, which is hilarious. And then the most funniest parts I remember in the film were definitely the parts where Frank visited the clinic, where he's trying to see a doctor, and he's talking to this one receptionist where he's like, is 6 taken? Does it have to be between 1 and 10? And she basically hands him a paper and says, you'll be called. And then right when he sits down, there's like a little hidden humor on the newspaper where it says something about Adam and Eve, skeletons discovered in Colorado. And even early in the film, in the very opening, you see dyslexia, a cure has been found or something like that, which is kind of like the in-joke humor of hidden humor on the newspapers. But anyways, right when Frank sits down, he actually is called up to go and, do his business, which is, be a sperm donor pretty much. And then he walks with Tanya and then this other doctor where he talks about it. She's like, okay, when did you know this problem? Yeah, it was me and my uncle. We like to go in the back and throw it around. And she's like, you like to go in the back with your uncle? And he's like, and what else is, I can't remember what she said. He basically goes on to say, oh, I can't keep up with him. I feel like I yanked it too hard. It's kind of numb, but it has no feeling. And then when she walks from the door, and he wasn't aware they had to give out his sperm and whatnot. And he's like, this place? And she's like, well, it may not be exactly the backyard, but it'll do. And then eventually he makes some noises while jerking off in the room, and then when he comes out, his glasses are all messed up, and he's smoking a cigarette and just follows her. And when he comes across another doctor, for some reason she thinks he's actually the number being called, and apparently when Tanya asks, hey, don't I know you, he tries to go with the flow, and then when he goes into one of the rooms, I think it's room number 7, he's having I guess he's having a little bit of trouble, and when the doctor asks him basically to, do you need help? And he's like, hey, do you have, Frank's like, do you have Dances with Wolves, The Rocketeer, Lady and the Tramp? And he's like, and she's like, hands him an adult video that says Major Hooters, and then when he takes it and watches it, he's like, Yahoo! And just really excited, and then eventually when he comes out, there's like 6 cups filled with sperm, and he's like, the tape was very entertaining. And the lady's like, follow me. And then he decides to ask, do you have Spartacus? Oh man, just fun times. Then apparently when he decides he's able to, try to track down Tanya's address, there's like several files where it says something like, the Watergate tapes, 18 minutes longer, Amelia Earhart, what else? And so many other controversial files or something like that. And then he actually finds a file where it says Tanya Roberts' address apparently, and starts to write it in lipstick on a handkerchief. And then when Tanya notices him, he's like, "Oh, I'm not doing nothing, just freshening up." And he starts using his lipstick to. He says, "Well, you gotta look your best and whatnot." And then apparently when he's having trouble, she basically calls in this dominatrix lady. Who's played by Julie Strain, and she has a whip, and she's in certain, provocative clothing, and apparently that's what gives Frank, the lashes on his back. And then when he comes home to Jane, she's wearing this electronic device, wanting to make love, and it has all these lights, like, pointing down at her vagina, where it has a heart on there, and then on the back, it's pointing down towards her ass. And then when when he goes undercover at prison, he encounters this one dude, which is played by Randall Tex Cobb, where he attempts to seduce him because he saw him earlier, like he's brushing his teeth with a toilet brush and stuff like that. And then whenever he goes into the shower room where he flips the soap towards him, he's like, "Would you pick it up, lover?" And then Frank's like, "No problem." When he removes the towel, it's revealed he's wearing some kind of protective steel underwear protecting him with a lock on there, and Tex is like, "What the fuck?" And apparently whenever Rocco reveals the plan to one of his cellmates, the guard gets the guard Arlie Ermey's character snatches it away, and then when Frank actually attempts to distract him, he says, "Hey, real slop has real chunks in there, and this chateau wine should be served chilled. It's at room temperature." And then apparently when the chaos ensues and a food fight goes on, Frank's trying his best to destroy the plans, like he eats one of them, and then when it gets mixed up with other papers, he starts taking them and putting them into a shredder and just starts putting some ragu sauce on them and starts eating them like they're fucking pasta, and then he starts making a fucking sandwich out of it. And then eventually, whenever they do escape, they get to his hideout, and whenever we see Tanya again, the camera uses this trick where pretty much they make this scene where her legs are just like going on forever, despite all the kneecaps and whatnot. It also reminds me of one scene that I forgot to mention, the second one, wherever Frank and Jane are having or basically they sort of the scene kind of having they're parodying the film Ghost, where they're making that clay pottery sculpture, and eventually they let it get out of control, and whenever Jane starts to rub her hands all over Frank, it's not really his body because of how ridiculously shaped it is, and whenever they make love, you see all sorts of scenes, like you see people going into rocket, flowers blossoming. That was a real funny scene right there. But anyway, then apparently whenever where they do go to the awards ceremony, that's where another funny part happens, where he goes under cover as Phil Donahue, and he starts reading I'll get to that. Whenever he tries to go on stage, apparently the stairs starts to move a little faster than he would like, and he's hanging on there for dear life, and he has to climb his way back on there, and when someone tells him to stop the stairs, he ends up like rolling down, and that's when I said he kicks his Raquel Welch's butt, and her head goes first into the microphone. And then, unfortunately, whenever they start to, read the teleprompter, Frank starts reading everything on there. Like he says, turn her over to Raquel, blah, 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 this. And she was like, I was supposed to read that. And she's pissed off. And then whenever she's about to announce, the award for best whatever it was, he tries to take it away because he thinks it's the bomb. He's talking about how, tuna, like there's too much, like there should be eating dolphins and stuff like that. Saying some pretty, very insensitive subject matter because that's typical of Frank. And then he starts saying, how cats must be skinned alive to, to provide warmth and all that stuff. And then apparently the funniest one out of all of them is whenever he has to do the musical numbers to avoid being caught. Like he knocks out one of the dancers. He's like, is that snot in your shoe? And the guy's like, snot! Boom. He knocks him out and starts dancing with the cane. And then apparently when they do that musical number and he has to collect all the canes, he doesn't know what he's supposed to do. He starts just holding on to them, and I guess he throws them off to the side. And then apparently he can't really dance, so he has to keep up. And when he tries to get off of there, they tell him to go back in there. And when they're doing this little slide right underneath their legs or underneath the crotch, he has to slide in, and his fucking head hits all the fucking ball sacks of all of them. And then when they start grabbing at them, he starts thinking that's what they're supposed to do, and he starts grabbing at it. And then apparently when he grabs that what's her name, Pia Sadora's hair, it comes off. It's actually a wig, and she's trying to make the best of it and just trying to keep up with the singing. And eventually the dancers all grab her and put her around Frank's head, and then she's singing like really loudly, and he ends up tossing her into a fucking trombone. Oh gosh, it's just hilarious. And the award director, I think it's or not the director, but the director who's trying to be in charge of everything, he's just in dismay. He even says at one point, sorry, I don't think we should have Phil Donahue anymore. And then whenever Ed Nordberg and several other men arrive because they saw Frank on the TV, whenever they arrived, they were like, we're here to prevent a disaster. And the director, he says, well, you're too late for that. And then of course the funny parts whenever Rocco and Frank are having this conversation to outdo each other. He's confused of who should get what. If he didn't give him the bomb, didn't give Rocco the bomb, I guess he would be killed, but everyone else would be safe, but he'd be dead. And then of course whenever he switches out the bomb with the gun, everyone does their face palm, like they're total in disbelief. But he does say one thing. He's like, mind if I pull the underwear out of my crack? A man's gonna go out comfortable. He's like, okay, that's it. And then he knocks the gun off, and he's like, okay, Rocco, your history. And then, of course, like I said before, hey, look, George Hamilton, and he grabs the gun. And just, he's like, I'm gonna blow this place up. And then Ed Hocken says, well, if I'm going out happy. And he just grabs this one lady and kisses her. So yeah, I can't remember every other line in this film, but damn, there were so many, and there's just so many gags and visual gags really, and humor still holds up very well, and you won't see this kind of humor anymore, and that's just really sad. But I think the trilogy ended up on a good note, even though the ending could have been a little better. But it's just a really fun-filled ride of comedy, and it just holds up so well. And it just sucks that most of the cast members are dead here, but they will be forever remembered for the roles they played and the parts they did. And yeah, I think this review went a little too long. But anyways, I hope you really enjoyed this review, despite my little mess ups here and there. But it's just really hard to talk about a great film like this that brought so much humor. Leslie Nielsen was definitely part of my childhood. Others like John Candy, and gosh, who else made us laugh? Gosh, I should know. I don't know, but if you haven't seen this third one, go ahead and watch it. If you haven't seen any of the Naked Gun films, I recommend you give them a watch. They're worth it. They're definitely well worth watching. They still hold up to this day, and sadly, films like these will never get made because of the whole PC culture that's been installed here. So yeah. But anyways, if I forgot something, I apologize. There's just too much humor and visual gags to remember, and hopefully I named enough stuff to enlighten you on this. So yeah. Well, you know what? I think I should wrap it up and call it a night because I'm getting tired and I have to do some stuff tomorrow. And yeah. Okay. I don't know what other videos will come out, but you will see them eventually. So I will see you folks in another video. Okay. Later.